There he is.
Hello.
Cameron Wisch in the building.
Uh,
Man, where you at?
I'm at my place in Highland Park,
Okay.
and I'm sitting in the backyard right now. I set up this like amazing chairs and with like a keyboard next to it, because I've been like giving some music lessons, and I was like, why don't I just set up outside, so I don't get kind of like burnt out of just like being in my room all day.
Yeah, is that where you've been doing your like meditation drums out there?
I typically do that. So my partner, she has like a practice space, like attached. So I'll play drums in there. Like if I'm doing it early in the morning, I'll go in there because it's kind of like soundproof.
Yeah.
Yeah, or sometimes I'll do it in my room, or I'll probably start doing it out here because it's like really nice just to like be outside.
I know it. I just came back from Sequoia National Park, kind of like I was saying, telling you yesterday, and it was such a relief just to be out like in nature, man. Like it was incredible. I see some people are joining, so we don't want to formalize what we're going to be talking about, but oh, can you hear me?
Sorry, I missed whatever the last thing you said. My internet is like a little funky.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's some people in here. I don't want to formalize what we're talking about, but Cameron is giving away free lessons to people of color and LGBT plus folks. And also he is offering free music lessons to white people engaged in anti-racism work. And so Cameron, I'm curious to know why this is important to you and why you're the only person I've seen post something like this.
Yeah, get right into it, to the deep shit. I think, I think the moment that we're in right now is really like forcing all of us to come to terms with our relationships. I mean, especially white people's relationship to whiteness, and it's inevitably going to be bringing up so much like shame and guilt and stuff that we've suppressed so long. And it's I think it's just like it's difficult to see like the magnitude of the work that it will take to fully like bring to light all of that, like darkness and racism that's like very deep in there. So anyways, I think like I've really been searching for what it is that I can really like do and contribute.
Yeah.
And I definitely attempt to do like all of the various things that I've been reading and people saying are helpful, like going to protests, reading books and making sure I'm like staying informed and kind of doing the deprogramming that way, just by like reading the history and trying to use my voice more as a white person. I mean, like not taking up space, but really like having conversations with my family members. And anytime there seems to be just some kind of iffy, just say if somebody has an iffy take on the situation, I might, try to engage a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And, just kind of try to, bring to light whatever's really going on.
And what do you mean? So, and why, I mean, just in my opinion, I feel like, and this is maybe one of the reasons why I haven't gone to a protest, is I feel like at this point, literally only white people can fix this issue, right? Isn't it only like, I was just at the chiropractor, my white chiropractor who I've been going to for years, and we were talking about Black Lives Matter and everything. And he even said, but he's also very liberal from Santa Monica. He was like, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter is a white issue. Like, and he said it so casually as a 65-year-old man. And he's saying, people have been marching for generations. And at this point, it's only white people who can make those changes. And it's like, white people. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yes.
I wonder, what is your family? You're from New Jersey, right?
From New Jersey. My family is like all along the East Coast, pretty much, different areas.
Okay. And so is there something that white people are taught about race relations in America, or are white people even taught? Because when I think about my childhood, it's like, and you know, my parents were very global mindset, you know, like they're very well traveled and everything.
Yeah.
They tried to instill a positive relationship with our blackness in our household. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And not to, it's like to be aware but not carry anger. And so on the flip side of that, I wonder what you were taught in your house about guilt and shame in the history of the country.
Yeah. 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 Hearing you ask that question, like, I'm like, I don't necessarily think I was taught anything like overtly, like there was never a sit down conversation.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like my parents have always carried a like compassion towards all people stance that really rubbed off on me, and I feel like I had a somewhat diverse upbringing, and so that helped a lot because I had friends of color from a really young age. So that really helps to just, you know, if you, I feel like we've had this conversation before, like if you grow up surrounded only by racist people, I think it would be very difficult to grow up and escape from that unless you're lucky enough to like have a moment where you see something, you read something and you realize, oh wait, like my entire life belief system like was a lie handed to me by the only person or the only people that I'm surrounded by.
Yeah.
And luckily my unspoken circle of people were very compassionate and very all about diversity. That being said, you know, I grew up in a suburban white school that still like teaches a very skewed version of history. And I'm like, you know, as liberal or woke as we think that we are, the more that we learn about this stuff, it's like, oh wait, like everything I was ever taught about history is it was written by white like, you know, the white supremacist system. So it's all infused in that, whether overtly or like under the surface. Yeah. And it's a lifelong process of discovering where that stuff got into us, you know, depending on how we were affected.
Yeah, and that's crazy because I feel like, and I mean, maybe this comes from your awareness, is I feel like Black people and people of color, Indigenous people, and I mean, I guess we have to qualify what that means, right? So Black slaves of African, descendants of African slaves, Indigenous people, you know, Mexicans, Tainos, all this. I feel like there's just an understanding that history is just not showing the full picture. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You mean to those groups, they understand that.
Yeah, it's just like...
Whereas I don't think as a white person growing up, we're like, oh, the history I was taught in school, that's the history of the world. I mean, until you get older and you start reading more and you're like, oh shit, like the stuff I was taught in history class is like way off, and if not like completely like false to the real, you know, to the real truth of like the way this country was built, and you know.
Right. But I feel like, and you know, we've talked before, I feel like we both are the type of people who dig for the answer. You know, like we have expansive mindsets, we're both musicians, we're both curious about the world. And I feel like a lot of people don't ever question and try to dig into that. You know what I mean? And I think it's interesting because looking at your post, like someone commented even on this, all lives matter. And so like, I just don't understand why all lives matter. It's like Black lives means all lives matter, right? Doesn't that mean all lives matter? Like if you're aware and woke about the issues of this country, like doesn't that mean that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to an inability to actually understand the current situation and where the Black Lives Matter movement comes from and why it's here now. Like, if you don't have a historical understanding of racism, if you don't have the historical and contextual understanding that Black Lives Matter grew out from, which is like the biggest need to undo the like historical wrongs against Black people and people of color that just began at the, you know, at the start of this country. If you have no context for that, you're just gonna, people are viewing it as an attack, or like, I mean, it's so clear that it comes from like a defense mechanism too, because they're like, oh no, I'm not the one that is saying that Black lives don't matter. And why would you say that only Black lives matter? Of course, all lives matter. Well, it's like, yes, of course, all lives matter. But in the situation that we are currently in, historically, there are some lives that have not mattered and systematically have been oppressed. But for people who have no concept of that, you just can't even really have a conversation about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I believe that there's like, you need to employ different methods to reach those people, because you have to meet people on the level that they're at. You can't try to like, you just can't like jump into like all of this intellectual, contextual stuff with somebody who hasn't read the same books as you, you know, or just doesn't have the same idea of history.
But and you know what's crazy is from a privileged perspective, right? So if we look at any type of privilege matrix or how intersectionality and, you know, white male and then everything down, does the white collective consciousness even have a reason to care about the truth of history? Like, is there even a reason? Maybe right now, because everyone is being forced to look at it, right? So it's like, it's visible, it's in your face, you have to have some type of reaction. But from a privileged perspective, maybe for so long, no one has even been affected, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
and then to say that, hey, you are responsible, not you directly, of course. And that's another thing I don't get. It's like, I was talking with a friend of mine, and we've known each other. She's a white girl for like 10, 11 years, and we were having a racial discussion, and she dropped the all lives matter situation. And I said, you know what, I can't talk about race issues with you because she thinks that by saying Black Lives Matter, it paralyzes or it invalidates the pain of her life. So she came up in an abusive household, right? A lot of, you know, a poverty-stricken family. And for some reason, when she hears Black Lives Matter, she feels that that's erasing her individualized pain. She's like, I don't have any privilege. Like, what the hell? And so I'm wondering, how does someone cope with that? Like, this is not about your individual situation. This is about like the group identity or the group think of the situation, you know, or maybe just about awareness or consciousness or something. Because I don't know, I feel like a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people hear Black Lives Matter and it feels like, oh, you're attacking my pain, or you're making it seem like I have privilege when I'm not rich. You know, like I feel like there's a little nuance or something there.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like, well, the people who act really defensively, it's coming from a place of having a lot of pain that hasn't been looked at. So when you carry a lot of trauma and pain that's hidden in there,
yeah,
if something comes at you like Black Lives Matter that you perceive as an attack on you, and you haven't looked at that stuff, you like can't remove yourself from feeling like you're like being personally attacked, when it's like, this situation has like nothing to do with you personally. It's like a cultural, historical situation, but it's like you're so caught up in your own individual story that you can't see outside of that. Just everything is an attack on you.
Right. And like, Beach City Poetress, she says everyone wants to be fought for. Oppression can be understood by the majority, for every culture has oppression in their lineage. Everyone wants everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be to be seen. And so
And
you're right. It feels like an attack, right?
like, so like with your friend who feels like she came from like a more like poor upbringing, like the first thing that comes to mind is like you could maybe say to her like you're absolutely right. Like, you know, poor people and just less privileged people in this country really have been forgotten. And the systems in this country do not support, you know, almost like connecting empathetically with her situation. And then it's like, once you can really empathetically connect with her, and then it's like, now that we've connected on that level, by the way, like on a separate issue, separate from that, which you are 100% right, is, you know, that's where her pain is coming from, and that's legitimate. There's this separate issue of Black people being oppressed in this country. That's, you know, that you know, you may have nothing to do with, even though you know, all white people are participating in the building of that culture. But almost like, I don't know, finding a way to present it that's not in a way where she feels attacked, but just getting her thoughts on what is her opinion of, like, you know, of racism in this country. Does she think that it exists in the country? Has she ever witnessed racism?
Yeah.
But it's like, I mean, yeah, what's coming to mind is just like connecting with people on an empathetic level first is a really good tactic for like really being able to talk to them about this stuff. If you're willing, you know, if you even want to have the conversation with them at all, which I really believe it should be white people talking to white people. And this is not the emotional lifting that Black people, people of color should be doing.
Right.
Any of those people who are fighting this fight, like, you know, absolutely should be doing whatever they want to be, but it's not, it's only white people that are really need to be like taking the reins and like understanding our responsibility to undo the systems that white supremacy built and that have benefited us our entire lives, however aware of it we are or not, you know?
Yeah, and I didn't want to engage. I said, "Hey, we're not going to talk. I'm not going to talk about race with you." And she said, "Well, you know, white people are going to have to be a part of the conversation." And so, I don't know. It's almost like she just wanted to express her opinion about. She wanted to express her opinion to me about what was going on. You know?
It's like, yeah. She wants to participate in the conversation, but not have it with other white people, you know,
Right.
Only have it with somebody who is going to be, whose opinion is different from hers that she disagrees with and refuses to listen to. It's like, so what kind of conversation you want to have? One where you're the only person whose opinion you listen to, you know? It's just like, white people need to be having this conversation with other white people, but almost like she wants to have it with you because because there's a friction there.
Right.
And there's this, there's a certain, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't engage in that, and I think I've had to do that for my own mental health. You know what I'm saying?
It's not your job to engage in that. It's your job to look after yourself and do the work that you want to be doing, and, you know, pursuing your creativity and where you can shine your voice in this whole thing. But it's not your job to be going around to the white people who feel so attacked by this and like pat them all in the head and say it's going to be okay, because it's not okay. And you know, white people have to talk to each other about it and to deal with these wounds. And you know, it's okay for us to express our own like shame and guilt that we're feeling. We should, because to pretend like we don't have that, I think, would be lying to ourselves, you know?
And so about the shame and guilt, so I heard this quote. I want to give credit to the person because I don't know who it's from, but it said something like, white shame and guilt and Black anger, let's go ahead and say people of color anger, they are wings of the same bird. So one wing is white shame and guilt, and the other wing is Black anger. And so how do white people get to the place to where they're willing to look at that guilt and shame? How do Black people get to the place to where they're willing to look at that anger? And how do we heal from that, right? Because, you know, in my journey, I think I have at some points tried to be the Black person who wasn't angry. So it's like you have this anger under the surface, but you don't want to be perceived as angry. And so how do we get people to heal just from the narratives that they've been told? You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
If there's a willingness for a white person just to look at history and what has happened, if there's a willingness for a Black person to look at the anger, kind of get to the bottom of that, to see what that's made of and what it is, do you think like that would be helpful, or is it even possible? Because I feel like if people start healing from guilt, anger, shame, and all of this stuff, maybe there won't be any more country, because politically all of this stuff is built to kind of like, it's built to like, I don't know, it's political, you know, that's how it's built. It's not built for people to heal and look within and contemplate and, oh, I release my guilt. That's not what this is about.
Capitalism is fueled on us having as much guilt, shame, and anger as possible, and teaching us that the thing that fills that is money and buying stuff. And we just keep buying and buying and buying. And in order, you know, buying, eating. We're trying to fill this void. We're trying to fill the hole in our bucket, which at the bottom of the bucket is a hole of shame, anger. And until we look directly at what that thing is, we keep trying to use whatever we can. And capitalism is just fueled off of that, because if people felt self-fulfilled and had self-worth, there would be no need to fill yourself with external things.
Oh, wait. One more time. Okay, my phone. Let me plug it into my charger. But remember that you said external. Don't forget what you just said.
Yeah, I think I remember the main points.
Okay, so you said if people are willing to fill the holes in themselves, there would be.
Yeah, like we all are a bucket, and the holes in our bucket are our shame, our anger, our guilt. And until the way to plug, I don't think it's maybe not possible to ever fully get rid of that stuff, but if you just bring awareness to it, then you realize the patterns that are at play in your psychology. Like, because I know in my own experience, like when I'm feeling shitty about myself, which is gonna come from insecurities, guilt, shame, like whatever it is, there's a hole in my bucket of like self-worth, and it's pouring out that. And I try to fill that hole with food, with drugs, you know, drinking, smoking weed, anything that like pushes down the emotions, because I don't want to feel that stuff. And sometimes we need that as like a crutch to get through the day. But ultimately we're like covering the hole with Band-Aids, and eventually the hole's going to open up again. You know, something's going to trigger us. We're going to freak out and get angry. And at some point you have to just look directly at that stuff. And I think you can do that through journaling, through therapy, through all different like healing modalities. And once you start looking at that stuff and just bringing awareness to it and to the patterns of how it unfolds in your life, it starts to like move. It becomes way less, you know, the holes become smaller or something. It's like,
That's healing. It's healing.
Yeah, it's healing. And maybe it's possible that at a certain point the holes are completely closed. If there were no holes, I think you would be like an enlightened being, and there would be like no personality there anymore or something. But right. I mean, this is coming back to the point was just that like your initial point was about white people's shame and Black people's anger, which I think we were like mentioning, like we were talking about it the other day, where like both of those reactions are a reaction to a huge generations long historical injustice.
Right.
On the side of Black people being angry at the injustice, and white people feeling so shameful that the systems that we built are the ones that perpetuated the injustice.
Yeah.
And there's practical steps that we can take on the external to work towards fixing these things. Changing the government, informing ourselves by reading, all those different things, external things. But a whole separate element of it is our inner psychology and the way that we deal with our own emotional lives, which is a separate issue that only us individually can look at. And like your friend who's all lives matter, she's like, that's an expression of not wanting to deal with that stuff herself. She wants you to put the Band-Aid on it. She wants you to tell her, it's okay. You shouldn't feel any shame. You weren't any part of this. It's
Right.
like, sorry, you are a part of this. You might not think you've been racist, but there's just this whole larger system that there's no escaping from.
Do you think that do you think that it's logistically possible? And maybe what you're saying is it's about mental health, actually.
Yeah.
It's about mental health. It's about spiritual healing. And yeah, if white guilt, if people just take ownership for their story, maybe it's just about that. Tell your story. And I mean, but I've been on my book journey for a very long time, and there is something empowering about telling your own story, because you feel like I don't know, there's more ownership, and you see how things kind of click together, and you see that you are what you need, and you have always been what you need the whole time. And I feel like to tell an All Lives Matter person, or to tell any of these people on TV, hey, you're like, I don't know if they're willing to look at their guilt. And I hate to say, are we really willing to look at our anger and see where that's from and take responsibility for our anger? Are white people really willing to take responsibility for that shame and guilt and what has caused all this? Because once you take responsibility for your narrative and you put it out and you say, hey, this is what it is, I don't care what anybody thinks, that's empowering.
Yeah, I'm totally behind that. And I think taking ownership of your story is the self-healing work.
That's the work.
What came to mind for me is because our stories are what they are. We all have traumas in our stories. Yeah. And the truth of our story exists whether we acknowledge it or not.
Right.
So you can pretend like it's not there, but if you're not looking at it, then it comes out through the back door when somebody triggers you and you scream the hell out at them, or your partner does something and you get super angry at them, or you pull away, you get depressed, you lock yourself away. It's like, this is all because there's all these programs running that happen because of all these childhood traumas, everything that happens in our life. And I would venture to say it goes pre our life. It's ancestral traumas. You can see the traumas that are passed down generations. I see it in my grandfathers, my grandmother, everything. And these traumas, they're programs running. And when you can't see the programs, you just, all of a sudden you realize you're acting out in ways that you're not even conscious of. And so taking ownership of your story, it's really just looking at the real truth of your story. It's like, we think that we have to craft like a new version of ourselves or something, but it's just like actually like write your story down from the beginning and look at every piece of information. But some of those pieces of information, those doors, they stay shut. We do not white people, we do not open the door of white guilt and white fragility. Like, oh my God, that's like, for some people, they cannot open that door because.
And so I'm trying to figure out why. Is it because what's behind that door is so horrific? Yeah. And I mean, and I'm sure, and we're talking on a collective level, but I mean, just on an individual level, if someone tells you that you go up to that door, you open that door, and it's going to be terrifying as hell. But once you open it and you see what's behind it, you'll feel better. You'll eventually feel better. So why? I don't understand. Maybe because we've opened the door, I think. Right? Do you think it's because we've opened the door and we've looked that we can say, so what, yeah, what do you think about that? Because we have opened it, but
I don't, you know, it's not one door. It's infinite doors.
Okay.
And I think what I gather is that me and you are people that are really fascinated with opening doors. That's just part of that, like, you know, I'm Scorpio rising or whatever, you know, you can look into our astrology, like,
right.
I'm all of that aside, I'm somebody that's really fascinated with the inner realm, with psychology. I really like this comment. No one wants to be alone when the doors are open. That's a really good point, because this country is so individual and we are so separated from one another that we don't have communities to help us open these doors, because you can't. I totally agree. You should not open these doors alone because it's too overwhelming. And the places where I go to open the doors, whether it's in therapy or like various healing modalities, there's typically some sort of community in place where when I'm going through some shit, I have people that know me and can be there for me, you know. But you have to have those people, and most people don't have that. And most people grew up in situations where the concept of opening doors is not even a thing. Right. You do not open those doors. We don't have conversations about our feelings in this family, you know. Wow. That's like, I would say that's like the majority of the country, you know.
And you know, and I think that's on both sides. I mean, and sometimes I wonder if it's a Black thing. And you know, and I'll just speak from my own Black experience, my own Black family, is like sweeping stuff under the rug, pretending things didn't happen, pretending traumas aren't there. And I don't want to say it's comforting to know that white families do that, but maybe that's
definitely not all white families.
right.
I mean, I think I was a bit lucky that, like, I've got a lot of therapists in my family.
Yeah, see?
But even with that, you start opening doors and then you realize, oh shit, like, this door opens into a room with 1,000 more doors. And then it's just like, okay, so I thought maybe I was going to arrive at a destination where my self-worth is just perfect and I don't worry about anything anymore. No, it's shit gets more intense, shit gets darker, shit gets harder. But once you get comfortable opening the doors, it's not as scary anymore. And you can go into it. It's still going to emotionally hurt. You're still going to feel the feelings. But previously, when it felt like you were getting like crashed over by a huge, like, tumultuous wave, it's going to feel just like a little, you know, a light breeze, because you've like stepped back and you see the positive sides of opening the doors, like you were describing, you know.
Yeah, and it's also
how much
about,
better you feel once you actually look at this stuff.
It's vulnerability. What you're saying is vulnerability. It's the terrifying emotional nakedness. And I feel like it's the same as, have you ever been skydiving or bungee jumping or anything like that?
I've been like cliff jumping off like a 60-foot cliff, but never out of the sky.
Okay, so maybe it's the same type of thing, because there's a moment to where you jump, right, where you're about to jump out of the airplane or you're about to jump off the ledge, to where it's so terrifying that you feel like you're gonna die from that feeling, right? Like you just lose, like it, and maybe that's it. It feels like it's gonna kill you to open those doors. And maybe when you realize that it won't kill you, then you can kind of get used to opening them and interacting with that energy, you know.
Once you open them and you realize you aren't going to physically die, I would say that is a version of death. Because when you keep all those doors closed, it's like you've built up a certain version of yourself, you know, this personality that you built up that you carry around, and this is me, Cameron is blah 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 blah, but that version of you is the version that keeps all of those doors closed. But I don't want anybody to know that stuff about me, so I'm going to create this version that's like a box like this size, and that other stuff is going to exist out here. So when you open those doors, a certain version of yourself dies, the version of you that you thought you were.
Right. And that
Um,
Beach City Poetry said, this death of a secret leads to transformation. Yeah, when the death occurs, you transfer and you level up, and it's almost like you have to ritualize it. And I know we both we're big on, yeah, like, yeah, practices with meditation and ritualizing and practicing self-love and self-worth and, you know, self-care. And maybe that's it. It's like you also have to take care of yourself emotionally, know when to step back, when to engage. And to the
yeah.
larger conversation, I just feel like protests and stuff, that's not the venue for me. I feel like as a writer and musician and stuff, I like inspiring people to tell their own story, just to take ownership. Like, hey, this is what worked for me. And maybe just to drop that little bit of inspiration in their mind about, you know, just tell yourself, if anyone else, tell yourself where you fall into all this. And I feel like that's what you're doing with your free music lessons, to people of color, LGBT, and white anti-racism, or people who are engaged in that. It's just to drop that little bit of inspiration, right? Of what you can possibly do. Do you think,
Yeah,
would you
I
agree
mean,
with that?
I think if people are inspired by that, it's like a byproduct of what it does for me. I want to get into the whole offering, but I want to, these last three comments, but who to be after death, transform to what, who, and then the responsibility of making better choices once you transform. I wanted to just comment on that because I think when you open doors and a piece of you dies, the version of yourself that you knew, you don't actually have to, like you were saying earlier, you already are the person that you want to be. It's just that you haven't brought in all the parts of yourself that you forgot about because you closed the doors to that person that was so hurt.
Yeah.
So after the death, you naturally are just becoming more of who you already are. You just kind of have like a blind spot to that larger picture of yourself. It's not like we don't need to choose some version of ourselves that we're trying to become. We already are the best version of ourselves. The things that are preventing us from seeing that version of ourselves are the traumas and the blocks
And the
and the things that we don't want to look at. And then the responsibility of making better choices once you transform.
Yeah.
I think when transformations start to take place, like when the transformations start to take place, you just naturally start making better choices. It's not necessarily a conscious thing you need to do. I think what we do need to do is like have conscious awareness to the ways that we act and to our energies, our emotions, you know, noticing the places where somebody says something and we get triggered and we kind of close off. We just continually bring awareness and self-compassion to those things. And then our choices, the ways that we act, it comes from like an intuitive place.
Well, yeah, it falls in line. I feel like it falls in line with the pursuit of peace, right? So your choices will start to mirror and mimic kind of the path that you've set for yourself.
They start to mimic the inner peace that you found by looking at that stuff. The outer choices you make start to become peaceful because you made peace with those parts of yourself that you had previously closed the door on. You know, it's actually like we have these parts of ourselves that we're in an inner battle with. Like I know for me, it's the ego, and my ego always flares up. And a lot of times we want to be like, oh, I'm not going to let you like drive the car. Like I'm enlightened and I won't, you know, the ego is not going to win this game. You're like you're in like a boxing match with yourself it's like the big self and the small self.
Yeah.
And my new metaphor for the ego is that there's a car and, you know, the infinite or the spirit or whatever you want to call it, just like Mother Nature is driving the car and my ego is in the back seat. And I want the ego to have a great ride. You know, the ego can pretend like they're the one driving the car and have a great trip. Pretend like they're the one that is making all the music and making the art and, oh, this is mine. Like, you know, this is, I I'm such a good this, or, you know, I'm the best this. It's almost like let the ego believe that, but I really know who's driving the car. It's not the small me. It's some bigger picture of interconnectedness with all people and all things that we are inevitably a part of just by being alive and being in an interconnected, you know, natural system.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that the ego part, because it's almost, I wonder if that's tied to the need to want to be seen and want to be heard. If that's an ego type of track, like, hey, my story is important too. I want to be seen and I want to be heard. I wonder, because yeah, the ego will make you, it can ruin your life if it's not kept in perspective.
Yeah, it just needs to be a balance. And the ego is like a hurt little kid that really needs attention.
Yeah.
And if you pretend like it's not involved, it will sneak in through the back door and pull some like sneaky shit.
Wow. You know, I wanted to see what you thought about the idea of community and kind of groupthink, because do you think subscribing to certain narratives as a group or as a community actually kind of hurts the pursuit of peace and self-worth? So for example, if the group identity is that we stray away from shame, if the group identity is that we are angry, part of our story is anger, and then someone takes a step in a different direction, what does that do to the community and the value system, right? Because I think all of this is built on agreement that we don't look at the shame. It's built on agreement that, you know, we are angry. Like, our identity is we are angry for what white people have done to us. And so when you take a step in a different direction, I wonder, like, if the group gets angry. Isn't that what's happening right now though? It's like when people
and rightfully so, you know. But it's not anybody's place to tell anybody how they should react to anything. You know, it's everybody's individual responsibility to figure out how they want to deal with the feelings that come up. You know, sometimes we think that the anger or the shame or whatever is like useful, or we can use that to affect. But like when we step, we step away and we go into an empty room, it's just us and whatever our feelings are. And we need to come to terms with that stuff. I think we can use these like really heavy emotions, anger, shame, to inspire us to really go, you know, I'm going to look at this shit and I'm going to make some real changes. I'm going to go to therapy and I'm going to work through where this stuff comes from. And then it's like the internal battle and the external battle. I'm going to look at this stuff internally, and then externally, I'm going to make moves that are in line with, you know, but I think you have to fight both battles, because if you only fight the external one, there's hidden stuff in there that's going to mess up your, you know, like I said, the ego is going to come in through the back door, and all of a sudden you're going to realize you're like taking advantage of people, even though you had good intentions, but you didn't look at that your ego was so hungry to be in control. That
you didn't look in the shadow of what you were doing.
Yeah, like you can even really have good intentions, but you didn't realize. I noticed this in myself, you know, where the ego sneaks in and, you know, just like messes things up, or, you know. But have you
found writing it out?
Wait, I wanted to get back to your question about community.
Oh yeah.
Because, like, I think it's really important to be a part of communities.
Mm-hmm.
But like when groupthink arises, I think that's a matter of like when you take any sort of belief system and like put it up on the altar and worship it like it's your God, you know, like putting anything on an altar in that sort of way is dangerous and like tyrannical towards yourself, because what it means is that you're putting ideas outside of yourself as your guiding light, when every piece of information, everything that you do, it has to be funneled through your own experience. And if it doesn't resonate with you, you can't align yourself with it. Like for me, like it's like my truth is my guiding light to the direction I want to go in. And if I'm in a community of people who are like, we think that slavery was good, my truth would be like, there's no way that I could be a part of this community because I just do not align with that. But if you don't know what your truth is, or you don't have like a strong inner sense of self, it's very easy to get wrapped up in various group thinks and communities, and to just want to believe what everybody else is believing because you're scared about having your own opinions and scared of being ostracized from the group if you think differently. And
but don't you think that like that, I feel like most people, oh gosh, and I want to personalize it. I don't want to say shit about anybody else, but it's like, I don't know if a lot of people have access to the courage to challenge what the group is thinking.
Yeah.
Come on, this is what the group is thinking, but this is what I'm thinking, and that shit doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah, but like, I think people like us were somehow lucky to have like enough of a support system of some sort that we felt safe enough to break from the system, because I think about people like stuck in religious situations or like, religious cults where like you, like for me to break away, I already come from like kind of a free thinking family. So I'm not losing love by thinking individually. But if you are in a part of a religious community where if you think differently, everybody your family, your friends, your entire life up to that point will ostracize you, and your parent, like, I've heard, situations where, and people I know where your parents will like disown you.
Yeah.
And the fear of that, I don't blame people for the people who don't choose to break away, because I don't know what it would feel like to be in that situation.
What do you mean, to face the fear of being ostracized?
Of being ostracized by every person in your known universe. Because,
But isn't that, I mean, religion in and of itself is a group think. That is what it is. Do you think so?
Well, it depends on your relationship to it.
Right.
Because you can take the ideas of religion and put them on an altar that you worship as your God, and then you have placed your own intuition, your own thoughts and feelings, and your own truth beneath that. And I think that is dangerous. But I think religion is chock full of amazing ideas and inspiration, but you run all of that stuff through your internal
personal story. Yeah.
You run it through your internal computer system, which for me is a computer system that tries to, it's the truth system. And you're never gonna fully see all the angles. But like I was saying, like, if you run these things through your system, you'll see that, loving your neighbor, having compassion for all beings, these are things that I agree with, and I 100%. The things that you agree with, it's not because you heard the religion and then you adopted that. It's because you already believed that was a truth for yourself that you just externally heard materialized in another tradition.
Yeah.
But it's not like it began in the religion and then you took it. It was already in you. You just recognized it when you saw, oh shit, that's what I believe, but I just can never articulate it that way,
And that part right there, the consciousness, right? So that's what it is. It's literally a level of consciousness and active engagement and participation in your life. I think that maybe starts from your story and taking responsibility for your place in the world. Would you agree with that?
Wait, say that one more time.
So to get access to that consciousness, right? That conscious living, it has to come from a place of like just telling yourself it comes from a place of looking at your experience and telling yourself and just looking at everything you've experienced and been through. I feel like that instigates the consciousness that allows you to decide what you put on an altar and what you don't?
Yeah, because when you haven't come to terms with your own story in that way, like when you're essentially hiding from your own truth, then you don't know what your own truth is. And so when you don't know what your own truth is, you accept other people's truth. And for a lot of people that's religion. And they take that truth as, as the only truth, but they haven't done the work to find out if they really believe in the stuff that they are worshiping. If you have gotten in touch with like, this is interesting for me because I grew up mainly Jewish. Like I grew up, my dad's family is Jewish, my mom's family is Christian. Nobody's really that religious, but we celebrated Hanukkah and Christmas, but it was all kind of surface stuff, just like holidays. And so my relationship to Christianity and Judaism was very, it wasn't deep. It wasn't like a spiritual connection. It was more just like, oh, this is like some traditions that our family does. And I think as I grew up and went through school, I'm very, a deep thinker and analyzing, and a lot of us with this kind of thought go through, like an atheist sort of phase. I was like, I don't believe in any of this crap. I believe in this and that, whatever. But now I'm like coming full circle because I'm starting to discover my own personal relationships with Judaism and Christianity. Because I'm discovering like some deeper texts and some more kind of on the outskirts, like just like, the more experimental types of thought and the more like traditions that are almost more in line with like indigenous shamanic traditions, where I really believe like if you go back far enough in any of these traditions, it was a bunch of people out in the desert like meditating and making music and receiving information and writing it down. But then that information got run through the egos of like 10,000, just like infinite people, and it came out as kind of the religious teachings we have today, which there is still a seed in there of this like really powerful shit that came to people when they were like disconnected from everything except just being like in the desert alone. But you got to dig really deep to find those like the gems. I mean, but you really just follow your intuition and see, if you're looking for truth, you can look in those texts and be like, wow, this is like powerful, or like, wow, this is like so far off. I would never like follow that type of commandment or something.
Well, what you're saying is defining and establishing the relationship on your terms. Like, this is my relationship to Judaism.
Yeah.
This is my relationship to my whiteness. This is my relationship to my blackness.
Yes.
This is what it's going to be. Yeah. And in order to get, and as we get close to the hour mark here, to circle it back to what you're doing with your program, and in order to get to that place, it's like, maybe I feel like we just have to be humble. We have to listen to other people. It doesn't invalidate our story, our individual pain, and decide how we're going to participate. And I feel like you are deciding by launching this program how you want to be a part of the conversation. It's like, you know what? This is a huge issue affecting millions and millions of people, but my contribution as Cameron is going to be this. My contribution to Black Lives Matter as Ross is going to be this. And it comes from a very soulful, conscious place. And I think when we're acting from soulful places and conscious places, that's all we can do. And it's going to make us happy. It's going to make us fulfilled, because we know that we are doing what we can, I think.
Yeah. And I would say it took me a long time to figure out this way that I wanted to do this offering. I didn't see it. And then literally one day I was like, oh shit, like this is what I should do. So to get into that kind of process of like figuring that out, I think so many white people right now are feeling lots of shame and guilt and struggling with these inner feelings, and hopefully like starting to research and read books, and people are finding, as it seems like people are attempting to participate as much as they can. And like you said, like for me, like I've
Oh, I'm
I know,
giving
I
you a
see
thumbs
it,
up.
yeah.
Yeah. To
Um,
and also to the comment that said, "Thank you, Cameron, for your contribution. This convo is super excellent. Thank you, Ross." Yeah, I mean, go ahead. Can continue.
yeah. I'll just finish this thought, but where did I leave off?
Did you
Oh
forget
yes,
it?
so that like I've been going to protests and definitely like calling Congress people and just trying to participate in as many of those things as I can. But none of those things are really like my thing. Like you were saying, like going to protests for you doesn't feel like your method of contributing. And I think similarly as an artist,
Yeah.
I still will go to protests, and sometimes I feel really, there's kind of like waves of like feeling really inspired to be out physically in the street and be a part of that, which I think we should do as much as we can without without burning ourselves out, and then like not being able to give our gifts that are maybe closer to like what our passions are, because that was the most powerful thing with realizing that I've been in this phase of like seeing how healing music is for me, whether it's like drumming as a form of meditation, which like times where I've been feeling like incredibly anxious has like really helped me.
Yeah.
And the same with just studying various types of music. Like I think because our brains are like, there's so much going on and our brains are all over the place, it's really helped me to have like like a single pointed focus to put all of that like erratic energy into. So
Yeah.
like I've just been like, I started studying Indian percussion, and like it's just a way for me to like channel all of that energy into like a productive place. And that's been really healing for me, and it really like fills my cup back up. So that allows me to be like ready to like, okay, like I'm gonna like, oh, there's protest tomorrow, I'm ready to go out into the street because I'm feeling like jacked up and like
And that's and I feel like that's a good so it just gave me alert that we have 1 minute 33 seconds, and I feel like
okay.
that's a good place to end.
Well, should
Is
I just finish like how I mean that's probably a good place to end.
well
I think my
I feel like
final
yeah, go ahead, final
my
thought.
final point was just that I tried protesting, I tried this, and then I realized that offering music lessons for free for people could be such a healing way for people to fill their cups back up and be inspired to participate more. And it's the area that I am the most passionate about, that I won't run out of steam because I can take on a lot of lessons and I'm just like, I'm ready to go. Like protesting, I'll run out of steam. Calling, like, I'll do it, but I'll run out of steam. Music, giving people an opportunity to study. Yeah. I'm like, okay, let's like pack my schedule and just give this offering. And like my cup gets filled too, because all these cool, interesting people are reaching out. Anyways.
So yeah, so I mean, what you're saying is acting from a place of alignment and abundance. That's actually what you're saying.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's coming from the work that you've done that allows you to act from that place of alignment and abundance. And I feel like that's what I try to do too. What fits well and everything like that. 12 seconds. Last word.
Last word. I'm so grateful to you for having this conversation.